Well, welcome to another edition of Dailyish Devotionals. I am Pastor Brian. And before we dive into the chapter for today, I want to share with you a little bit of humor. I did find this cartoon that I thought was pretty funny. After this self-quarantine, social distancing thing, my weight's going to be just fine. It says my height's going to be off for what my weight should be. I got to tell you another story happened to me this morning. You know, there are certain times when you spend more time with families, when you're reminded that you are raising children to be young men, and you're raising them to be just like yourself. I was reminded this morning that the apple does not fall far from the tree. We had a puzzle that we were putting together that was graciously given to us by a friend, and it's kept us busy for a while. We've worked on it on and off. And this morning, the boys and I were getting close to the end, and Tracy has offered some assistance, but mostly the boys and I. But there were maybe a couple dozen pieces left this morning, and Isaac and I sat down to finish it. And I declared that I was going to be the one to put the final puzzle piece in, because it was my puzzle, and I wanted the honor of finishing the puzzle myself. So we got down to a few pieces, and I thought I carefully took a puzzle piece out and I put it in the pocket of my shirt, so I'd have the last one I put in. We got down to no pieces left on the board, and I carefully pulled out my puzzle piece, and I went to put it in the open spot and realized it doesn't fit in that open spot. It fits in that open spot up here. Wait a minute, there's two open spots. Isaac's got this huge grin on his face, pulls a puzzle piece out of his pocket, puts it in the last remaining open spot. The little fart had the same exact idea that I did. Put a puzzle piece in your pocket to make sure you were the last one. I think the moral of that story is pray for Tracy. I mean, in all seriousness, she's living with three of me. Well, you might think that's all wine and roses. It sometimes cannot be. So just pray for Tracy. Today, we're going to talk about the 10th chapter of Max's book. I had mentioned last time that maybe we wouldn't go through this anymore. We'd stop doing it. And I got an email from an aunt that lives in North Dakota. She's my favorite aunt that lives in North Dakota. And she said, I think you should keep going with Max's book. It is the season of Lent, and we need to be reminded of what Christ endured and did for us on that cross. And I thought, you know what? I'm right. Thinking and getting an email from my favorite aunt that lives in North Dakota, I was reminded of one of my favorite aunts, or my favorite aunt that lives in Minnesota, and how she could be a real blessing to my ministry at this time if she would just send me some chocolate chip cookies. You know, what better to sustain a minister as he puts together these devotionals each day and just tries to lead and shepherd his congregation than being able to have one of those awesome chocolate chip cookies that were made with love. So I'm just thinking out loud, that'd be a wonderful thing to help sustain me through this. Focus, get back. Okay, 10th chapter, Max Lucado's book. I understand your pain. Wonderful chapter. I'm glad we're going to go through it, because I'm going to do just a bit more reading from the chapter, because Max talks about it and explains this much more than I do. This quote from Spurgeon, to trust God in the light is nothing, but trust him in the dark, that is faith. Love that quote. I did see a couple other pictures on the internet when I searched it that it may be attributed to someone else, whoever. I didn't come up with it, safe to say that. But Max's title of his chapter is, I Understand Your Pain. And it begins the chapter with a story about he's sitting in the couch and he hears his wife scream from the garage, and he rushes in to see what's going on, and here she has a mouse trapped in a trash can. And Max is going to take the trash can out and free the mouse, and the whole time he's doing it, the mouse is just freaking out in the bottom of the trash can. He keeps telling the mouse, just, it'll be okay, buddy, just settle down, calm down. But no matter what he did, the mouse kept freaking out. He brought the mouse to an open field near his house. He put the trash can down. The mouse scurried off. And Max thought to himself, what would it have taken for that mouse to understand that I didn't want to hurt him? Would I have to learn to speak mouse? Would I have to have grown a pointy nose and a long tail? He laughed and thought probably. As he was walking back to his house, it occurred to him, well, that's exactly what Jesus did. He didn't learn to speak mouse, obviously, but he traveled from heaven to earth and lived a life. And then he says, explore this thought with me. Why did Jesus live on earth for as long as he did? Couldn't his life have been much shorter? Why not step into our world just long enough to die for our sins and then leave? Why not a sinless year or a week? Why did he have to live a life? To take on our sins is one thing, but to take on our sunburns, our sore throats, to experience death, yes, he had to do that, but to put up with life? To put up with long roads, long days, and short tempers. Why did he do it? Because he wants you, he wants us to trust him. Even his final act on earth was intended to win your trust. The Gospel of John, Jesus says, I am thirsty. So a jar of wine and vinegar was there, and they soaked a sponge in it, lifted up to him on a pole. He took a sip, and then he finally said, it is finished. With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. The final act of Jesus' life were the sounds of a thirsty man. He leaves his final appeal, you can trust me. Now, he didn't have to suffer thirst. Why does he endure such thirst? Well, while we're asking this question, Max, let's add a few more. Why did he grow weary in Samaria? Disturbed in Nazareth? Angry in the temple? Why was he sleepy on that boat in the Sea of Galilee? Or why was he sad at the tomb of Lazarus? Or hungry in the wilderness? He didn't have to suffer thirst or hungry or anything like that, at least not to the degree that he did. Why did he endure all of these feelings? Because he knew you and I would feel them too. He knew we'd feel weary or disturbed or angry. He knew we'd be sleepy, grief-stricken, and hungry. He knew we'd face pain. If not necessarily pain of the body, we'd face pain in the soul. And he knew we'd face thirst. We may not thirst like he did for a drink after the beating on the cross, but our soul would thirst for truth. And because he understands, because he's been there and felt that, he knows and he asks us to come to him. And we can come to him knowing that he understands what we're feeling. He has been where you are and can relate to how you feel. And if his life on earth doesn't convince you, then his death on the cross most certainly should. Max says Jesus' life is one big example of what he came to do for you. His death is the example of just how much he loved you and how far he would go to show you how much he loved you. Jesus' life and death point to what he did for you. And what he experienced is anything that you can experience. There's nowhere you can go, nothing you can do that is outside the experience of Jesus. So we can come to him and trust him, knowing he knows how we feel. I use this example in my confirmation class once in a while, and I always go to sports, I'm sorry. But if you're going to learn how to play a sport, do you go to a coach who has read everything about the sport yet never experienced it or played it or ever coached before? But he's real book smart. He's read it all up. Would you rather go to a coach that's been doing it for 30, 40 years and he or she can give you a track record of successes that they've had? Sure. You always trust a person that's been there, done that. Who would you rather talk to with your problem? Someone who understands where you are or someone that has no idea what you're talking about? Of course. Someone who has been in your shoes. Jesus has been anywhere your shoes take you. Max says in the closing of his chapter that Christ fulfilled 332 distinct prophecies in the Old Testament, his life and his death. Why did Jesus proclaim his thirst from the cross? To lay just one more plank on a sturdy bridge over which a doubter could walk. His final act then is a warm word for the cautious. You can trust in me. Don't we need someone to trust? Don't we need someone to trust who is bigger than we are? Aren't we afraid? Aren't we tired of trusting the people of this earth for understanding? Aren't we weary of trusting the things of this earth for strength? A drowning sailor doesn't reach out to another drowning sailor for help. A prisoner doesn't beg another prisoner to set him free. A pauper knows better than to beg from another pauper. He knows he needs someone who is stronger than he is. Jesus' message to the wine-soaked sponge is this: I am that person. Trust me. Especially in these times to come. Know that you can trust Jesus. You can approach him with whatever feeling you have. Anger towards him, abandonment, hurt, grief. He's been there, done that. He understands, and more importantly, he wants you to come to him. So take heart and take strength in knowing that Jesus has been there, done that, and wants you to be there with him. We'll see you tomorrow.